As Gurion himself said, "We must expel the Arabs and take their places." In 1936, the Palestinians launched a mass general strike. Protests lit up in numerous cities, and the strike held strong for 6 months. While initially peaceful, the British occupiers responded by declaring martial law. They recruited Zionist fighters to join them in raiding and attacking Palestinian villages. Scores of dissidents were executed. The strike evolved into an armed uprising against British rule. The British, along with their Zionist partners, used a strategy of blowing up thousands of Palestinian homes. On a single day in the village of Jaffa, they demolished over 200. This uprising was drowned in blood by the sheer force of the British imperial machine by 1939. 5,000 Palestinians were left dead. On the other side, 300 settlers and 250 British soldiers. It was through this bloody repression that the Zionists formed a bona fide armed forces, with thousands of them who were trained and armed by the British Army. In reality, it consisted of 2 wings. The Haganah, the official military force recognized by British authorities, and the other, a more radical wing, the Zionist militias. The biggest, the Irgun, with membership in the thousands. The Irgun was a more hardline terrorist organization that mostly targeted Palestinians, bombing civilian markets and more. Years later, they would also start attacking British soldiers. Their most famous attack was the bombing of the King David Hotel, murdering 91 people, among them 17 Jews. This ruthless approach of the Irgun was so popular in the settler consciousness that one of its head commanders, who presided over many massacres, would later become Prime Minister of Israel, Menachem Begin. Albert Einstein and dozens of other Jewish academics and icons published a letter in the New York Times describing Begin's movement as a political party closely akin in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. As both the Haganah and the Irgun advanced colonization, their goal remained clear. President of the Jewish National Fund, a group designated to reclaim the land of Israel, Joseph Weitz, wrote in 1940, "There is no room for both people in this country, and there is no way, besides transferring the Arabs from here to neighboring countries, to transfer them all. We must not leave a single village, a single tribe." In 1947, the 70-year-long lobbying campaign to be granted a formal state came to fruition. The British Crown turned its colony of Palestine over to the United Nations, which cut it into pieces, changing this phase of Palestine's map, speckled with small dots of settler territory, into this, the Jewish state of Israel, which was created on top of another country, gifted with 55% of its land. Palestine was cut into 3 separate parts, and the capital of Jerusalem, the center of Palestinian life, became a UN-controlled international zone. But there was a big problem for the Zionists. Their new state was still 40% Arab. This was an unacceptable notion for Ben-Gurion and other Israeli leaders, who stated, "There can be no stable and strong Jewish state so long as it has a Jewish majority of only 60%. The audacious act of plopping a European settler state on top of an Arab country while excluding the native population from the discussion and decision sparked outrage throughout the Arab world. Resistance to it escalated into a full-blown war in 1948. Months after the war began, the Haganah and Irgun launched a joint campaign to address another problem, called Plan Dalet. Plan Dalet targeted the most passive, peaceful communities, so that all Palestinians would flee. The series of terrorist attacks and mass expulsions that followed is known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. The infant year of the State of Israel was one of widespread, vicious massacres. Deir Yassin, a village with no reported resistance, was stormed by settler militia. They bombed homes, committed mass rape of women before executing them, and other atrocities. One child survivor tells the harrowing account of his entire family being lined up and shot, including his mother, as she breastfed her newborn baby. 200 people were murdered. According to a Red Cross official who visited the site days later, here, the cleaning up had been done with machine guns, then hand grenades. It had been finished off with knives. Just 12 days later, Jewish forces bombed and raided the heavily populated city of Haifa, while sadistically broadcasting horror recordings over loudspeakers of Arab women wailing, and messages like, "Flee for your lives. The Jews are using poison gas and nuclear weapons." In Abu Shusha, Israeli forces attacked and occupied the village. The Palestinians that stayed in their homes were punished with rape and hacked to death with axes. Fleeing villagers were shot on sight. 60 people were officially killed, but years later, 52 more bodies were found in a mass grave. Al-Dawayima was also captured by Israeli forces, who murdered its men, women, and children. 200 bodies were found, with another 250 missing. Days later, Israeli troops marched into the village of Saliha and blew up a mosque, killing the nearly 80 people taking refuge inside. After the remaining villagers were ordered into the square, Israeli troops unleashed a rain of bullets upon them from machine guns mounted on armored vehicles, murdering another 70 people. One of the few survivors from the brutal attack recounts the bodies being left to rot for days before they were bulldozed into a mosque and blown up. Those who tried to resist in any way were collectively punished. One of the bloodiest of the massacres during the 1948 war was in the town of Ladia, where soldiers indiscriminately killed nearly every civilian in sight after gunshots were allegedly fired from a nearby mosque. State forces threw grenades into windows and shot those escaping their burning homes. According to Israeli military sources, 250 people were killed in just 30 minutes. This terror campaign largely accomplished what it set out to do. In each of these villages, and in hundreds more, the Arab population left in its entirety. Eyewitness British General John Bagot Glubb doesn't hide the colonial savagery. It would be an exaggeration to claim that great numbers were massacred, but just enough were killed, or roughly handled, to make sure that all the civilian population took flight.